Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs by the Grimm Brothers. Once upon a time there was a queen who wished she could have a baby. The queen got her wish when she gave birth to a baby girl who had skin white as snow, lips red as blood, and hair black as ebony. They named the baby princess Snow White. But sadly the queen died after giving birth to Snow White. Soon after, the king married a new woman who was beautiful, but as well proud and cruel. She had studied dark magic and owned a magic mirror, of which she would ask daily, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all?" Each time this question was asked, the mirror would give the same answer:
"Thou, O Queen, art the fairest of all."
This pleased the queen greatly, as she knew that her magical mirror could speak nothing but the truth. One morning when she asked the mirror, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all?" she was shocked when it answered,
"You are, my queen, but Snow White is even fairer than you."
The queen flew into a jealous rage. The queen ordered the huntsman to take Snow White into the woods to be killed. She demanded that the huntsman return with Snow White's heart as proof. The poor huntsman took Snow White into the forest, but found himself unable to kill the girl. Instead, he let her go and brought the queen a heart of a wild boar. Snow White was all alone in the great forest, and she did not know what to do. The trees seemed to whisper to each other, scaring Snow White, who began to run. She ran over sharp stones and through thorns. She ran as far as her feet could carry her, and just as evening was about to fall, she saw a little house and went inside in order to rest. Inside the house everything was small but tidy. There was a little table with a tidy white tablecloth and 7 little plates. Against the wall there were 7 little beds all in a row covered with quilts. Because she was so hungry, Snow White ate a few vegetables and a little bread from each plate, and from each cup she drank a little bit of milk. Afterwards she was so tired she lay down on one of the little beds and fell asleep. After dark the owners of the house returned home. They were the 7 dwarfs who mined for gold in the mountains. As soon as they arrived home they saw that someone had been there, for not everything was in the same order as they left it. But the 7th one, looking at his bed, found Snow White lying there asleep. The 7 dwarfs all came up running, and they cried with amazement. They fetched their 7 candles and shone the light on Snow White. They were so happy that they did not wake her up, but they let her continue to sleep in the bed. The next morning when Snow White woke up, and when she saw the 7 dwarfs, she was frightened, but they were very friendly and asked,
"What's your name?"
"My name is Snow White," she answered.
"How did you find our way to your house?"
The dwarfs asked further. Then she told him that her stepmother had tried to kill her, and that the huntsman had spared her life, and that she had run the entire day through the forest, finally stumbling upon their house. The dwarfs spoke with each other for a while, and then said,
"If you will keep house for us, cook, make beds, wash, sew, and knit, and keep everything clean and orderly, then you can stay with us, and you shall have everything you want."
Now the queen, believing that she had eaten Snow White's heart, could only think that she was again the first and most beautiful woman of all. She stepped before her mirror and said, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of the all?" It answered,
"You, my queen, are fair, it's true, but Snow White beyond the mountains with the 7 dwarfs is 1,000 times fairer than you."
This startled the queen, for she knew that the mirror did not lie, and she realized the huntsman had deceived her and that Snow White was still alive. Then she thought and thought again, how could she rid herself of Snow White? For as long as she was the most beautiful woman in the entire land, her jealousy would give her no rest. At last she thought of something. She went into her most secret room. No one else was allowed inside, and she made a poisoned apple. From the outside it was beautiful, and anyone who saw it would want it, but anyone who might eat a little piece would die. Covering her face, she disguised herself as an old peddler woman that no one would recognize her, traveled to the dwarf's house, and knocked on the door. Snow White put her head out the window and said, "I must not let anyone in. The 7 dwarfs have forbidden me to do so."
"That is all right with me,"
answered the peddler woman.
"I'll easily get rid of my apples. Here, I'll give you one of them."
"No," said Snow White, "I cannot accept anything from strangers."
"Are you afraid of poison?"
asked the old woman.
"Look, I'll cut the apple in 2. You eat half, and I shall eat half."
Now the apple had been so artfully made that only one half was poisoned. Snow White longed for the beautiful apple. When she saw the peddler woman was eating part of it, she could no longer resist. She stuck out her hand and took the poisoned half. She barely had a bite in her mouth when she fell to the ground dead. Back at home she asked her mirror, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this land is the fairest of all?" It finally answered,
"You, my queen, are fairest of all."
When the dwarfs came home that evening, they found Snow White lying on the ground. She was not breathing at all. She was dead. They laid her on a bed of straw, and all 7 sat next to her and mourned for her and cried for 3 days. They had a transparent glass coffin made so she could be seen from all sides. They lay her inside, and with golden letters wrote on it her name, and that she was a princess. They then put the coffin outside on a mountain, and one of them had stayed with it and watched over her. Then the prince came. He said to the dwarfs,
"Let me have the coffin, for I cannot live without being able to see Snow White."
As thus he spoke, the good dwarfs felt pity for him and gave him the coffin. The prince had his servants carry it away on their shoulders. But then it happened that one of them stumbled on brush, and this dislodged from Snow White's throat the piece of poisoned apple that she had bitten off. Not long afterward she opened her eyes and lifted from her coffin, sat up, and said,
"Good heavens, where am I?"
The prince said joyfully,
You are with me.
he told her what had happened, and then said,
I love you more than anything else in the world. Come with me to my father's castle. You shall become my wife.
Snow White loved him, and she went with him. Their wedding was planned at great splendor and majesty, and they lived happily ever after.